welcome back to the Empower Her podcast. If you're watching me on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And if you're watching on another platform, then I'm so excited for you to be here today. So, today is going to be an interesting topic, one that I feel like a lot of people get shocked when I tell them as a coach. When I tell them to do this, they're shocked. And we're going to talk about rest and the importance of rest today. Yep, we're going to go there. You guys loved the functional freeze episode I did a couple weeks ago. It was one of the highest downloads in a while. And I'm not surprised, right? So many people feel stressed, burnt out, like they may be in some sort of fight, flight, functional freeze. So I'm not really surprised. But the idea of rest goes really well with this topic because I have people in my DMs asking me all the time when I post videos about it on TikTok. They're like, oh my God, Deanna, what do I do? How do I start? And I always say, stop trying to do the most. Stop trying to do everything, right? This is the conversation I have. And my clients also come to me about this constantly. And just a little bit of like a backstory of my own personal experience. And, if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be talking to my clients about rest, I would have thought you were insane because I was the poster child for multitasking, doing the most, and literally not resting. It was crazy. When I was, back in the day, 10 years ago, even 8 years ago, I was working in corporate. I actually had a side hustle as well. I would wake up at 6, be in the office by 8. I would work till 5 or 6. And then I would either go to dinner or drinks or the gym or go home and cook and do laundry, dishes, whatever, literally until I had to go to bed. Like I was home literally to sleep and shower and change basically. Like you could not get me to be home alone. And obviously that's a whole nother discussion that I had to deal with in therapy. But it was definitely something I was constantly on the go, 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 go. When I was single, I dated a ton. Like I'm talking about going on 4 or 5 dates a week. Like I was insane. And then when I was in a relationship, obviously I would try to spend time with my boyfriend at the time, right? But rest, absolutely not. I don't know who she is. I had no idea who she was back then, right? And I was young. I was in my 20s. I was working up the corporate ladder. I literally would say yes to everything, whether it was an extra project, managing an extra team. It was always yes, yes, yes. How could I make it happen? Versus like, oh no, I don't have the capacity for that, right? At one point, I had 21 people under me. And yes, it was like a temporary situation that we had discussed, but 21 people is crazy. I think the most amount now as like a coach, especially, and I coach my clients, is like the most you can manage that's going to actually be quality is like up to 10 people. So I don't know how I did that. Well, actually, I do know how I did that. I literally worked like 12-hour days. I was stressed all the time. I was happy if I got 20 minutes at lunch to like stuff my face with food. I remember one time it was a bank holiday and I was in the cab going from one place to another, like writing an email at 11 p.m., like insane. And I thrived. I thrived. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I got exactly to where I wanted to be. I got 4 promotions in 6.5 years. I was the youngest team leader in the department. Like there were so many amazing things that happened. I doubled my salary. I almost doubled my salary. I loved my teams. I created new teams. I did new things in the company that we hadn't done before. So I'm never going to say that I regret that time that I did that, right? But looking back on it, was it healthy? No, it wasn't because I literally burned out completely. I would have physical symptoms. I got stomach aches really bad towards the last like year and a half in corporate. I'm not joking. Every day I had knots in my stomach and stomach aches. It was so bad. I was stressed. I feel like I was in fight most of the time. Like I would just react to things better. And even looking back at some of my relationships that I had, even with friends, I would definitely react more intensely than I probably should have, probably because I was in a state of burnout constantly. The way I reacted in certain romantic relationships, it just was, it was a lot, right? And it's been 2 years since I quit corporate, and I've been living a much slower life, which, by the way, was not easy to transition to. Anyone says that it's easy, it's not. At first, I had I had like PTSD from everything that happened in corporate. And then I got to the point of like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Why am I not doing enough? Like I was doing so much more before. I'm not being productive. I'm not going to be successful, right? I had to go through all these stages of feeling like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough, or this is bad, or this is the problem, or I don't deserve rest, right? We often think we don't deserve rest. That's a big one for people as well. But I realized that I don't actually need to be on 24/7 to be successful. I work way less now than I did, and I have a much bigger impact. I make the same amount, if not more money. And yeah, I want to be rich, obviously, but it's not just about that anymore for me. It's not just about that position title. It's not just about that salary, right? I want to have more meaningful friendships. I want to have boundaries at work. I want to be able to say no to things that don't serve me. And I want to do work that's going to feel purposeful for me. Because obviously, working in corporate, working up the ladder, there were a lot of things I did that I didn't enjoy, which again is part of the game. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was something that I had to deal with. And that's just not part of how I want my life to be right now, if that makes sense. And when I work with clients, I like so many of them are in this state of worrying that they're not doing enough. And most of the time, what I tell them is, you need to do less. And they're always as shocked when I say this to them. They're like, oh my God, Deanna, really? Are you sure? What do you mean? Or their jaws drop and they don't know what to say. But that's literally what I tell them. Here's a few examples. I work with a lot of career coaching clients. So job searching. If you're actively job searching, right, you're looking at LinkedIn for jobs, you're applying to jobs, you're editing your resume, you're sending out networking emails, no more than 5 to 7 hours a week. Okay. I have clients out here doing 10, 15 hours. Absolutely not. There's an issue if you're doing that much. You doing more is not going to actually be helpful. Let's say you're setting a new goal. Spend 60 minutes on that goal once or twice a week. That's it. Are you adding something new to your routine? Let's say you're adding a mindset or nervous system regulation tool. Do it for 5 minutes a day. 5. You do not need to sit and meditate for an hour or journal for an hour or whatever it is. It is absolutely not necessary. I will never tell my clients to work to the point of exhaustion or burnout. And anyone who tells you that isn't looking out for your best interests, period. And unfortunately, when we work in a lot of these corporate companies and just companies in general where you're not the boss, they don't always pay attention to your work life balance, right? And that's why it's really important for you to understand what you want and then be able to set those boundaries and be able to say no and be able to prioritize what's actually going to be important for you. That's going to be super, super important. So, typical questions that I ask my clients is, when was the last time you felt rested? Or what is your self care routine? Or do you feel your basic needs are being met? They like literally look at me shocked when I ask these questions. And honestly, a lot of the times they don't even know what to answer because no one's asked them this or they haven't thought about this, right? They're always like work, 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 task, 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 goal, goal, goal. But that's not actually right, right? I usually, for the majority of my clients, I'm telling them to do less. I'm telling them to do less and rest. And this is why it works, okay? If you're burned out, right, you're doing the most, you're burned out, tired, and exhausted, then your focus and motivation will be less, period. So, just like a really basic example, let's say you have a task you need to do, you have to send a couple emails, right? It'll take you 20 minutes. But if you're tired, exhausted, and burned out, you will not have the mental and physical energy to do those emails in 20 minutes. So it may take you 2 to 5 times longer to actually do that task. Is that being productive? And then you're just going to keep taking longer to do all these tasks. So every task is going to take longer, and you keep getting into this vicious cycle of being burnt out and things taking longer and doing the most, and so on and so on and so on, right? Last week we talked about, a few weeks ago, about managing your energy, how to better manage your energy. That's a great place to start if you don't know where to start with rest, right? We want to look at how we can make the most out of our 24 hours without working ourselves to death. And when I say make the most, I do not mean sleep 6 hours and then work the rest of it. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm talking about prioritizing rest so that you can be more productive in the work you do, so that you can work less hours, so you can do less. Because here's the thing, if you don't prioritize rest, maybe in your early 20s it won't, but in your 30s, let me tell you, and beyond, it's going to catch up to you. It is going to catch up to you. And your body will start to show symptoms. It will start to shut down, even if you don't realize it. And that's going to be a massive issue, right? And I know what I'm saying is probably different than what you've been taught. It's different than what I've been taught. I was taught growing up, and again, this is nothing against my parents or anything. That's just the society we grew up in, especially in America. I grew up in the States, right? That's very much that mindset. In Europe, not as much. And I have the experience of both as being, dual national and seeing both is in Europe, it's very much, or in America, it's very much that American dream. You work super hard, you hustle, you can do everything. In Europe, we have a lot more of that work life balance. I still see in corporate that, like, there's less of that, but it's much, much better than in the States. But I grew up in the States again, and I was taught that if I work super hard, I can have everything I want, which in principle is really great, but I wasn't taught to rest. I wasn't taught about burnout. I wasn't taught about all those negative things that can come with literally overworking myself. I was never taught those things, right? But that's why I'm teaching that. And that's what I've learned is that you can actually work strategically and make sure to take care of yourself. You can do just as much work in less time and have more time for self care. So if you're feeling like you're burned out or you feel like you're in functional freeze, the first thing I would do is not try to add more things into your routine. I would just start to see if you're resting enough. I would just start to see, are you resting enough? Right? That's what's going to be super important. And you want to make sure that you're doing self care. Okay. So take a little audit. What percent of your day is spent doing things that feel good to you, like that actually feel good to you? Make a number, create a number of how many hours that is. So theoretically, this is what I tell people is you should be aiming for 1 to 3 hours a day of rest and self-care. This is besides sleeping. This is rest and self care, 1 to 3 hours. It'll depend on the day, some days more, some days less. I want to be realistic, but that's what you should be aiming for. And rest does not mean necessarily like scrolling through your emails and then responding to it at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, right? Rest is like, do you have time to read? Do you have time to sit in the bath? Do you have time to go to your workout that you wanted to do? Do you have time to take a nap? Like those things are self care and rest. Like, do you actually have time for that in your routine? And are you making time for that in your routine? That's the question. And again, this can change. We talked a few weeks ago about creating a menu card, which is where you create a menu card of your mindset, nervous system regulation work in the morning and at night, and then you pick and choose what works for you. Definitely go listen to that episode if you haven't. That's a really, really great one. But you could do a menu card again, so you can be flexible, right? But this is a goal to work up to. If you're having zero rest right now, just start with 5 minutes, then do 10 minutes and 15. Work your way up to it and see how that feels as well. And at the end of the day, if you neglect your rest, which by the way, if you neglect rest, you're literally neglecting your body and your mental health, then you're also neglecting your success and your well being because it will catch up to you. You will not be as successful unless you rest, period, point blank. Okay. And you can still be high achieving, you can still be successful, you can still be super rich and well rested. Anyone who tells you that's not the case is lying. Okay. Those people, those gurus that wake up at 4 a.m. and then start working at 5 and work till 9, 10 p.m., you don't have to do that to be successful. You just don't. It's not that you don't put in the work. It's not that you don't work hard, but you need to work smarter and not harder. And rest is an essential part so that your mind and body can regenerate itself. And then you can actually think better. And when you are working, you're going to be 10 times more productive. And honestly, someone who's well rested now in my 30s, I'm like, that is honestly the ultimate flex. It's the ultimate flex. So take an audit of your rest and see if you can start adding more rest into your day. I guarantee it's going to lead to way more success on your end. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, I also have one-to-one coaching spots open in my coaching container. I do offer 20-minute complimentary calls. If you want to have a chat with me without any strings attached, we can just talk and make sure we're the right fit together. You can DM me on Instagram and TikTok to chat about adding a call into the calendar, and we can have a nice little conversation. I hope y'all have an amazing and fabulous week, and I'll catch you in the next episode.